People are fascinating, and I believe that everyone has a story to tell of their travels, hobbies, passions, and experiences. I want to get those stories told so they can entertain, inspire, and showcase the amazing talents of people and giving you, the listener, food for thought. My guests have taken risks, put themselves out there, created businesses, or taken their passion to the next level. I feel very privileged and honoured to tell all those stories in my All About You podcast. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome to the All About You podcast. And today I'm very excited because I have my first husband and wife team. I would like to welcome back Sandra Bruce from a previous podcast, and she has very kindly offered her husband as well as a guest today. So Sandra and Santi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Let's talk about how you two met. And you've got a wonderful story about your engagement ring, Sandra. Right at the beginning, where did you two meet?
We met in Scarborough, in Yorkshire. It was about 1968 or 69. Uh-huh. And I'd got a job at the restaurant as a kitchen porter, which later became half waiter too. And Sandra was doing a summer job while she was at school.
We met on the stairs.
We met on the stairs while I was cleaning them. And later on we coincided in the staff dining room. We were having lunch together. Everybody had finished. There was only Sandra one side, a girl called Diane in the middle, and myself. And I fancied Sandra, so I started to asking her if she wanted to go out, etc. But I was quite nervous, and she couldn't follow or understand what I was saying. My English got a bit funny. So the girl in the middle, Diane, turned around to her and said, "I think he's asking you out." Yeah. So Sandra got a shock, gathered her plates and cutlery, and said no and ran away. So that was it. But later on, before closing time at 6 o'clock, her good friend Alison came to the kitchen while I was tidying up and said, "Listen, Sandra has changed her mind. We'll meet tonight. I'll go out with Mike Gilder and you go out with her. See you at 7 at the Odeon in front of the station." So that's the way we started.
Oh, what a romantic story. So Sandra, what made you change your mind about Santi's offer?
Do I have to be honest?
No, okay. No, make it up.
No, I'll be honest. My friend Alison really wanted to go out with Mike, but she said, "Come on, let's go as a foursome." And I said, "Oh, okay." She was very, very beautiful, tall, blonde, big blue eyes. And whenever we went out together, she got the handsome guy and I always got the short guy. And I got the short guy, but he was handsome.
And how many years have you been together now?
Nearly 50.
Married. No, 52 married and 3 because I was 16, I think. Yeah, 54, 55 years.
So you picked the right girl, Santi, didn't you?
Yes.
You met?
Yes, we met. We started going out after work, etc. During the summer. This first summer, Alison was with Mike Gilder, but the next summer she was with somebody else, with Peter
That was our best man in the end.
Yes, and this Peter happened to have a small Millie, a mini car.
Oh, right, yeah.
Mini Cooper. So they came round to Sandra's place, collected us. We were already there waiting, took us to the town centre. But on the way they argued so much that every time when we got to the town centre, I begged them to let us out. They go their way and we went to our way. So there was an age difference in age. About 5-6 years, because her birthday is late December. The next year we got engaged, and in 1971 we got married. Yeah. We got married in Church of England.
Yes, I remember when we got engaged. Well, he asked me to marry him. And at that time I was, 17?
Yes.
And I said, okay, yes, all right, I'll marry you. But in England, it's traditional to give your fiancé an engagement ring. And he said, oh, right. And I said, a good engagement ring, because I was under the false impression that perhaps his family had a lot of money. Because his family, I was brought up in a council house, very nice council house, nothing against it, but we never owned property, we didn't own a car. Talking to Santiago, his father had a car, they owned the house that they lived in, they had fields in a village and another house. So I didn't think that he had any financial difficulties. So I said, I can't go back to school. Yeah, I can't go back to school saying I'm engaged if I haven't got an engagement ring. So he went out and he bought me my engagement ring, which is still on my finger. And when he had to come back to Spain for the September exams at university, I said, I'll see you off at the station. He said, no, don't bother, because we'll both start crying. I'll go on my own. So he went on his own. What I didn't know is that he didn't
head for the station. I head for the road to York and started hitchhiking.
And it took you how many days?
Well, 2-3 days to get to the Channel, to the English Channel, and 13 days to cross France. And about 3 more days to cross part of Spain until I arrived to Valencia.
Because of the love of a woman, you spend all your money on an engagement ring.
No problem then.
I mean, that is a beautiful story. And the fact that you are still wearing the same ring.
Yes, it still fits.
She was definitely the one, Santi, wasn't she? There was no doubt about it.
That's right.
Especially after spending his savings on an engagement ring.
That is a wonderful
and
story.
Sleeping in fields all the way through France. And
well, it was funny. At that time, when you got to London, for example, and you wanted to leave London, you had to queue. There was a long queue of hitchhikers outside London, taking turns. So you took your place until they picked you up. The same happened to a larger scale outside Paris in France. And you made friends, saw people, you saw them again later on the road. And that was, in France, for example, I just from the Channel I went to Paris, and then I went through to Orleans, Poitiers, Blois, all the castles along River Loire, down to Bordeaux, and then from there to Biarritz and Spain. Then I crossed the border in Spain. Mind you, in Biarritz I had to leave the town running, chased by the police. Been given a lift by 2 Californian boys, surfers, long blonde hair, no shirt, jeans. They were driving a Volkswagen, a small one they had bought in London very cheaply. And every time it stopped, they mended it with wires. They were quite good. It took us a long time to get to Biarritz, and we were very hot. It was summer. So I saw a notice there, it says, House of Bains, the baths, Maison de Bain. And I said, what do you think? We could go there and have a shower. They said, oh, what a good idea. So they parked the car properly, and we walked our way, got into the bathhouse. There was nobody. We started, hello, who's here? Hello. And then 2 beach policemen stormed into the place and started shouting at us, allez dehors to the suite, out of here, quick. So they turned around, and one of them pushed one of the Californians. He nearly fell. And then I said, those are no manners. Ce sont pas des manières. So they got very angry, got their truncheons out and went after us. So we left the place, and they chased us for many streets. I was carrying my rucksack, quite a heavy one, and we were running. And we arrived to a road junction, 2 streets, one on the right, one on the left. So I said to the Californians in English, you take the left and I'll take the right. So we did. And after a while, I realized that nobody was following me. I was outside the town on the road. And so I continued walking and trying to get a hitch. But I left Biarritz like that. Later on, Sandra and I have been to Biarritz, and we've visited it properly, but then it was just in and out.
He was always running in front.
Well, in Valencia too.
In Valencia, was always, even I've run in front of the police in 71, when he said, come to the faculty, it's all right, there's no problem. When we got there was a big problem.
Actually,
That's the fastest I've ever run.
72.
Yeah.
Oh, no, 73, because you were quite pregnant.
Yeah, that's the fastest I've ever run.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
you know, Blasco Ibáñez
yeah.
used to be Avenida de Valencia al Mar. And there's what now is the Faculty of Geography. Mm-hmm. It used to be just philosophy and all the branches. And the police were in every other day. I had classes and she came with me. She was quite pregnant, and the faculty happened to be taken by the riot police, la Policía Nacional. So at the door there was a policeman, opened the door and said, what do you want? And I said, I've got a class, I've got some notes here for the pupils. And he said, let me see. So he started, it was a leather bag, quite suspicious. And the notes were sets of, the topic was the manifest of the Russian futurism. Very suspicious. So he held me like this and called his lieutenant. But at that time, fortunately, some students from the balcony up there dropped a bench that crashed on the floor. And so the lieutenant and that policeman got distracted, and I got Sandra. And I said, jump. We jumped into the side garden and ran like hell.
Oh my God.
He's little, but he's a troublemaker. Really.
Yeah,
Wow.
I used to be.
He used to be.
So you were a professor in the university?
No,
he was a student.
Oh, as a student.
It took
My last year.
ages
Wow.
to finish. When we got married, we
got
didn't
married.
plan it very well, did we?
No, we got married and we stayed in England. But there was a moment when I said, listen, I don't know whether I have to go to the army or not. I haven't finished my university training and I would like to finish it. Shall we go to Spain? And she said, all right, we'll go there for 2 years and then we come back. And I said, okay.
It never happened.
So we came here and things started going differently.
So Santi, where were you originally from?
I was from Castellón,
Okay.
near Valencia.
Yeah.
But then I lived in Valencia. I left my parents' home when I was 16 to go into a religious order. I was a novice for my initial training here in Valencia partly and in Albacete, down south. And then I went to some more years to Navarra, a place called Irache. There was a big study. We studied philosophy and lots of things.
But at 16 though, Santi, how did you make the decision to go and do religious studies at 16?
That was very popular in Spain then because it was a way of getting a good education.
Right, I
But
understand.
I was one of the oldest ones to join the order because most of my colleagues had joined the order when they were 11, 12. I finished the first part of my studies, my secondary education, and then joined the order, the religious order, Escolapios it was, before starting the second part, the second leg of the secondary education.
Because even 16 sounds incredibly young to be leaving the family, but as you say, back in the day...
Yeah, it was very popular that families had at least one, a nun or a priest, or, I mean, his mother was delighted, etc. Then he married her.
She was very miffed, quite disappointed when I left the order 5 years later.
Yeah.
But you continued those studies for 5 years.
Yes.
How was that for you? Did you
Quite
enjoy that?
Interesting. I had time to study, read, and think a lot. The system was quite different. It's like, have you heard of in Nepal or Tibet that families send the boys for some years or some time with the monks?
Yeah.
They learn to read and write, etc. And then they can leave. It was quite similar. We got up for all those 5 years. I got up at bang on 6 o'clock in the morning, went to bed at 10 o'clock. We were allowed very little time during the day for conversation, to talk. It was study, pray, sport when we had to do sport, and, for example, the meals, lunchtime or supper time. We were eating, and at the same time somebody was reading to us. The first part of the meal in Latin, the second part of the meal in Spanish. Two different lectors. The first one ate after he'd finished his half, and the second one had eaten very quickly before standing on the place. And that was for supper as well. And then if we were good at the end, odd days, the superior would ring a bell and give us permission to talk for about 10 minutes.
So for 5 years then, you followed a very strict schedule.
Yes.
In that environment.
Yes.
But it was very, very common here. Very, very common here. And particularly with lower middle class, it was a way of giving
in the country, in
education.
villages, some families with some kids, they had recruiters from the orders who went round and said, "You want your son to study? All right, send him with us to our college or to our place, and he'll be able to. You have no money to pay for his studies." And they played on the statistics on the average. From all these people, some will stay with us, and the order will have members, and that's the way it's.
Yeah.
That is so interesting because, as you say, rural families get this opportunity of a good education,
Yes.
and of course they're going to take it. They're going to take it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very, very strange for me when I arrived in Spain to see photos of Santiago with his...
Cassock.
You were in the order for 5 years, but you didn't finish your studies.
No. In the end, I just decided to... I had already taken vows and everything, the whole lot. And then I decided that wasn't for me. I wouldn't like to be all my life living like that in a community with priests and lay brothers and all that. At that stage, you had to ask Rome for permission to leave the order. So I wrote the papers. They sent them to Rome, to the general. I don't know whether it was the Pope or the general president of the order. And some weeks later, they came back.
From that to marrying
No, it took me... No, I left the order in 1965 and I met you in 1968. So there was some time in the middle, in between.
You can imagine for his family what a shock it was when he arrived in Spain with his 19-year-old. When I arrived in Spain, I wasn't even an adult because the
law was different.
You had to be 21. So Santiago was my tutor. I wasn't allowed to travel if he hadn't signed
No, women couldn't do anything.
Women
It was
couldn't
you
do
and all
anything.
the Spanish
The
women.
shock for me, yes, was
No
was
jobs
incredible.
were given to women without the signing of the husband.
He was
No traveling, no buying property or anything
nothing. I
without.
couldn't open a bank account. I was really ignorant. I didn't know what I'd got myself into when I came. And the fact was that when we tried to sort our papers out in Valencia, they told us we weren't even married. And
I tried to get both religions to agree. Before we got married, I went to see the Catholic parson in Scarborough. We had already a date with the Anglican, with the Church of England church. And he was very, the Catholic priest was very contrary. Can't be done. I have to officiate the ceremony. We've got to ask the bishop for permission, this and that. So he wouldn't facilitate anything.
no,
So in the end, after 2 or 3 visits, he said, well, and now I'm going on retreat. I'll be back in a fortnight. So I decided not to go back to him. We got married in the Church of England with Mr. Tubbs married us.
Yeah.
And then I forgot about it, because we could have gone to the consulate. No, it was far away. So we came back, and when I tried to just get
The family
the family
book.
book or a document for her, etc., so you're not married.
Yeah, not married. So we had 6 months. Well, Santiago had trying to get
I had to, for 6 months, I had to go and beg at the Archbishop's Palace next to the cathedral. I had to pay frequent visits to the canon who was in charge of mixed marriages. And he also was ill. He'll come back. What they say, mañana, next week. So in the end, after 6 months, we got a letter from the Archbishop saying that it was all right to be a mixed marriage with another faith. They had detected a small hitch, a little mistake in the marriage. So we ought to get married again just in case, ad cautelam in Latin.
So we did.
We did. And we got married 6 months later, or
Yeah.
6 months later.
Yeah, we didn't tell anybody.
Before she went to work, before I went to class,
we got
married in our neighborhood. Parish had the same name as St. Lawrence's here and St. Lawrence's there.
In England. So
And then we got married, and after
that,
that we went back from there. The priest gave us the certificate, signed. So we went to court. The church looked at it and married us there and then, and gave us the family book. And then from there we went to the police station in Gran Via Ramon y Cajal.
I'll tell that part. You couldn't have dual nationality, so we had to go to the national police, and I had to have an identity card, a Spanish identity card. And he was used to dealing with trying to avoid dealing with the police. I was still like, there's nothing wrong with a policeman. Like in England, like the
At that time, the terrorists,
yes,
ETA, were killing people.
Yeah.
So the police station was policemen with a machine gun here at the door, another one in that doorway, another one across the street. And when you went in and they asked you, what do you want? ¿Qué quiere usted?
Yeah,
Resting
the
muzzle on your belly.
Yeah, so we went in and we asked, the identity cards were made, and we went to a desk, and there was a huge fat policeman, so fat that his fly was open to allow the stomach to rest. And he said, what do you want? And he got a sheet of paper into the old-fashioned typewriters. And we gave him all the papers. We'd had my birth certificate translated. We'd had the marriage certificate translated, everything. And Santiago handed over his identity card and he started writing. And Santiago told me, don't say anything. So he said, name. And Santiago said, Sandra. And he said, she will speak. So, and I said, I thought I hadn't got to say anything. He said, no, you've got to say something. So he said, name, Sandra, surname, and I said Roda, which is Santiago's surname. So he looked at Santiago's identity card, looked at us, and he said, "Are you cousins?" And I said, no, we're not cousins, but you've got the same surname. And I said, yes, because we got married in England and I changed my name. And he just said, this isn't England. Let's start again. Name, Sandra. Surname, Bruce. Okay, second surname, and I haven't got one. And he looked at my birth certificate and he said, your second surname? And I said, Bruce. And he said, oh, so your parents were cousins? And I, no. I said, second surname? And Santiago, your mother's maiden name. And I said, I don't know.
She couldn't remember.
No, I didn't know. I said, she's Mrs. Bruce, she's Ethel Bruce. So Santiago said to the
I
policeman,
had to apologize.
Yeah.
Sorry,
She can't
remember now, we'll come back later.
So
And we went into the street. Near the door, in another doorway, I asked her, but can't you remember? And then we both remember, of course, Grandma Parker.
So we went back in and Santiago says she's remembered. So he's laughing with her. She's remembered, the English woman's remembered. Second surname, and I said, Parker. And he picked up his fountain pen and said, like the pens? And I said, yes, like the pens. And I had been practicing my signature with Sandra Roda, but that is when I became Sandra Bruce Parker.
I think that's very confusing for a lot of people when they first come to live here, particularly the Brits. You know, what is the family name? What do you mean the family name?
Yes.
And often when you go to the hospital, they're saying Familia Garcia, Familia whatever, because they know there's one patient in the hospital, but the whole family will be there.
Oh, yes.
The parents or the brothers and sisters, the cousin, everybody moves as a family.
Yes. The fun with the name was that about 5 years ago when I was sorting out my pension, I'd worked for 2 years in England, and apparently you can
Barclays
add that.
Bank.
And before that, some odd jobs. And that could be added because I didn't reach the maximum years paying the health stamp. So I thought, I tried to find my English number and I couldn't remember it. My mum had already died. She usually kept all the papers. So in the end, I looked online and there was the form to ask for your, was it social security number they call it? Or,
national insurance.
National insurance. And so it said you could download it, but you had to fill it in and send it by mail. And of course, it came to name, Sandra, surname, and I thought, did I change it before I left England? Is it still Bruce? Or because I was so proud of the new surname, or did I change it? And I couldn't remember. So I thought, well, I'll phone. I did a Skype phone call and I got this charming lady from Scotland. I had very great difficulty understanding her. And I said, I need to fill in the form for my insurance number, national insurance number. And she said, oh, you get the form online. I said, yes, I've got the form online. I said, but I've got a slight problem. And she said, what? I said, I don't know my surname. So there was absolute silence, of course. I'm sure she was holding the mic saying, this woman's a nutter, you know. And I said, no, you see, I left England shortly after getting married. So I don't know whether it's Sandra Roda or Sandra Bruce. She said, oh, this is very strange. I said, well, could you just look on the computer? And she said, okay, and she started, Sandra, well, we can't put the surname, can we? And I said, no. She said, last address, when living, etc. I gave all the information and I could hear the click, 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 click. And she said, oh, yes. And I said, you found me? She said, yes, I have. I said, what surname? She said, I'm not at liberty to say.
That sounds like the UK. We're protecting you from yourself with data protection. Yeah, been there, got it, the t-shirt. Yeah.
I just thought that was just so funny. You know, I'm not.
No, in the end,
to
she's
say,
not getting that money.
click. No,
She forgot about it.
No, I actually tossed a coin and I put Bruce. And a couple of months later, I did get the number through the post, but by that time it was too late. But that was very funny. I've had fun with my name, but my mum had more fun.
Oh, yes, her letters.
They were addressed to goodness knows who.
All sorts of combinations of her
Oh, I'm
names.
sure.
Mine too, and her.
Roda Gil, Gil Roda, Santiago Roda
Yeah,
Gil.
I'm sure.
She had the time of her life. But the problem was, in those old days, she used to send us a check. She used to send me a check at Christmas and on my birthday. And it could come with a combination of, it could be Parker, Rhoda, it could be anything. It's a good job we knew a bank manager who just thought,
Just to
okay,
live in a village,
what combination is it this time?
Exactly. Yeah, the lighter side of things.
We've had fun as well. We've lived through a dictatorship together.
Yes.
We've lived through
Through
the
a coup
transition.
d'etat.
A coup d'etat, yes.
She was working away in a factory, teaching, and somebody into the room where they were having 3 pupils and her, and said, 1936 again.
Which was
Meaning
when
the beginning of the Civil War.
started.
So they all left, and she got into, we used to have a Citroen 2CV then. She got into her car, and all the way from Niabeci, about 30 kilometers it was, to Almasora where we lived. And all the cars were flashing her because she hadn't realized that she had the long lights on all the time.
Yeah, it was so
And she
fun.
was thinking, the only thing she was, haven't got any chicken at home, haven't got any chicken, got to get chicken.
Yeah, we've lived through that.
My worry was I hadn't got any batteries for the radio, so I went for batteries. But a friend of ours here in Valencia, they lived there, and his wife was working at hospital. And the neighbors and friends came to him and said, Paco, go downstairs to the supermarket and get stock because this. So he leaves the kids, goes downstairs, gets the trolley, goes around the supermarket, and then pays, and comes back. When he was in the lift on his way up, he looks at what he had bought, a bottle of gin. Only.
Oh my
That
God.
was that. The stories of the military coup were incredible. We had a friend who had a very small car, a 600, and
yes.
a new driver. And you know that Valencia was taken
Right.
with tanks in the street. It was very, very frightening. Martial
The only
law.
place in Spain.
Yeah, and he was coming out of
Coming out of hospital.
the hospital, and he was
the
between
old fit.
2 tanks.
He didn't know what to
On a
do.
very, very small car. And he was like, now what do I do? How do you signal? Do you overtake a tank? Things like that. It was, now it's funny, then it wasn't. So it's been exciting and frightening.
I mean, there
Interesting.
is so much history between you two of you coming to Spain when you were a young girl. You were
Yes.
so young.
Yeah, I was very, very young.
And that was before we had all the technology, all the translations. So
Yes.
just trying to like feed yourselves and was a challenge.
And I wasn't worldly wise. I came from Yorkshire. Our family never had a car. There was no money for holidays or things like that. The only place I'd visited was London when my brother was living there. But that's it. And everybody says to me, you were so brave. I wasn't brave. I was ignorant. I just thought that being youthful bravery, when nothing frightens you, you think you can do. And it was, I mean, and people say, would you do it again? Yes, I'd do it again. There were many times that I regretted doing it, but yes, I would do it again. I don't know. If I'd have stayed in England, I would have probably stayed in Scarborough. Nothing against Scarborough, but now I've travelled a lot. I've learnt a lot about a different culture, totally different culture.
But I think when you go to live in another country permanently, you become a different person.
Totally.
I totally agree with you, Sandra, when you say you were young but you were ignorant. And I felt very much the same when I first came to Spain. I didn't have a good grasp on the language at all, but the amount of things I accomplished, getting internet, working out, bank accounts, it was bravado that got me through. So I've got to do this job. I have no Spanish. I used to, luckily we had translation, the computer, but, writing things out and literally standing in front of somebody, reading it in my best pidgin Spanish, I got things done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But when you were so young and back in the day before we had all the technology, it makes you a different person.
Yes.
Living in another country. You have to take on a different persona.
When you change countries, your personality, your memories, your mind gets like different layers. Different layers. You're not the same as if Sandra's got a sister. They were very close, very, very similar. But now she's a different woman totally from Sandra.
We're
You do change.
Yes, you do change, yes. I've done things that I would never have done. Speaking a language that I would never have spoken. I also criticise more the British. I criticise the idea of the British as colonialists, wherever they are. People should do things their way. And I remember, this is like an example, it's a silly example, but I remember we have English friends in Castellón, and my mum was over, her parents were over, and we went for a picnic. And suddenly my friend's mum said, "Oh, poor Santiago, he's the only foreigner." And there we were in Castellón, And,
well, it's very common.
And you said, he just laughed. And my friend's husband rolled over laughing. He said, "Yeah, he's the only foreigner here in Castellón." You're a guest in this country. And if you don't like it, pack your suitcases and go.
I think that's a very valid point, because there are a lot of people who move to Spain. I've only lived in Spain. I have no experience of living in other countries. But there are a lot of people who come to Spain and then are fighting against the Spanish system. No country is perfect. Every country has its frustrations with administration, legal, absolutely any country. But some people are just, it's rather like bashing your head against the same brick wall continually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're either going to say, okay, I've got two choices. I can accept it, and you move with the rhythm of that country.
Yes.
Or you say, okay, this is not for me. I can't do it, and I've just got to go back or try a different country or a different path.
Yeah. That happened to my son. He went to work as a teacher in Kirkby in Ashfield, which was actually my mum's town. He had a very, very bad time there. He couldn't work with that system, and there were a lot of underprivileged pupils, and it was his first post, and he had a bad time. He gave it up after 2 years, and he came back. And when he came back, I said, "Listen, you've paid the tax you've paid, you can probably get a lot back, because they work out the tax on what they think you're going to get for the year." And he said, "Do you think it's worth it?" And I said, "If you're visiting there," because he had friends there, so if you're visiting there, go to the tax office and find out. He said, "Oh, okay." So he went at 9 o'clock in the morning, and he was the first person. So when the guy sat down at his desk, my son walked over and he said, "What's your number?" And he said, oh, I didn't get one. And he said, "Well, you can't sit down here if you haven't got your number." So he said, "Okay." And he went up, pulled the number out, number 1. And then he heard the screen went up, number 1. And he went to the same guy and he said, "Number 1, sit down." And for my son, that was totally ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
It's not the Spanish way.
It's not the Spanish way. I said, "No, but they have their rules and you have to obey it. I mean, my son found the English systems, the way things were, the strictness, the rules, for instance, the tutor to a class. And I remember he said, do you remember the Monty Python's film, The Meaning of Life? There's a scene where John Cleves gives the instructions. If you're going to have your hair cut, you hang your coat on the third peg from the left, etc. And Jamie said, it was like that. He said, I had pages and pages of instructions for where they could hang their coat, where they could. And he said, when I finished reading them, I said, did anybody understand that? And they all said, yes, sir. And he was totally different. Totally.
Anyway, when you go to a different country and learn another language, etc., there's a point where you have to decide whether you want to be like those people or not. It's like a religious conversion. I know people who have started studying French and abandoned it because at one point they realized that to improve, to better their French, they had to accept and think and behave like French people. And so they didn't want any of that and stopped.
A lot of people come over to Spain, maybe they're retired.
Yes.
And I think they really, really struggle.
Mike and, Javier,
Mm-hmm.
there was this pub, British owned, for British people, and Mike found a retired major from the British Army, the ones with
with the handlebar moustache.
So they started talking, you've settled here. Yes, it's lovely here. And anyway, I've come here because at home it is terrible. Lots of coloured people, they don't integrate. They do not want to integrate. It's terrible there, so I came here. And how long have you been living here? I've been here 8 years, he said. Can you speak Spanish? Don't bother with the lingo. It's a joke. Anyway, I can tell that when I was 70, I started to learn Romanian.
70?
I'm 70, nearly 77 now.
And you started to learn Romanian at 70?
And I continue.
Almost fluent in Romanian.
That is amazing. Yes. I mean, another thing about learning another language is it's just so good for our brains. All the scientists are saying
they say
crossword
that
puzzles
slows
slows down
dementia
dementia.
By about 5 years.
No, well, he's going to live forever then.
Well, you're looking good on it. You're looking good on it.
Right.
Can I just say, I am so glad that we've actually got my first husband and wife team. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for us. I felt very, very comfortable.
Yes.
Very comfortable.
Yes, thank you very much.
Santi and Sandra, thank you so much. I'm going to mark this as a big win today. And it's just amazing your stories over the years, and just you obviously picked the right girl.
I did.
And Sandra,
yes. No, I
you
have no
picked
doubt.
the right boy. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe on whatever platform you are using. It is free. And if you would like to tell your story, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story.